I never thought I'd fall in love again. Not at 45. Not after burying my husband. But Rome has this way of making you forget who you were and believe in who you could be. I went there to scatter his ashes, to close a chapter, to finally let go. Instead, I met a man who looked at me like I was the answer to everything he'd been searching for. A surgeon. A widower. Someone who understood loss the way I did. In 9 days, he gave me a future I stopped believing in. And in those same 9 days, he took everything I had left. My savings, my retirement, my trust, everything. I'm not naive. I've taught literature at a university for 20 years. I've read every cautionary tale, every Greek tragedy, every story about women who fall too fast and pay too hard. But grief does something to you. It makes you hungry for meaning, for warmth, for someone to tell you that the worst part is over. That's what he did. He made me feel like the pain had a purpose. Like my husband's death wasn't the end of my story, but the beginning of something else. Something beautiful. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. And that's exactly what he was counting on. Now I'm back in Portland, staring at an empty bank account and a police report that goes nowhere. The man I loved doesn't exist. The hospital never heard of him. The number he gave me goes straight to voicemail in a language I don't understand. But I'm not writing this because I want pity. I'm writing this because I survived. Because I need you to know that it can happen to anyone. That love, real or fake, can be the most dangerous thing you ever let into your life. And that sometimes the only way out is to walk through the fire and come out on the other side. Before we continue, please comment below what city you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like. My name is Elise Warner. I'm 45 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon. I was a literature professor at Portland State University for 20 years. I loved my job. I loved my students. I loved the rhythm of semesters, the smell of old books, the conversations that went nowhere and everywhere at the same time. But I haven't taught in over a year, not since my husband died. His name was David. We met when I was 23 and he was 25. He was an architect, quiet, thoughtful, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. We never had kids. We tried for a while, but it didn't happen, and eventually we stopped trying. It didn't feel like a loss. We had each other. We had our routines, Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, Sunday hikes in Forest Park, vacations we planned months in advance. We were happy. I know that sounds simple, but it's true. We were happy. He died on a Tuesday morning in March, a car accident on his way to a site inspection. The other driver ran a red light. David didn't see it coming. The police said he died instantly. They said it like that was supposed to comfort me. Like instant was better than slow. But it didn't matter. He was gone. One moment he was kissing me goodbye in the kitchen, and the next moment he was gone. I don't remember much about the funeral. I remember people talking to me, hugging me, saying things that meant nothing. I remember his sister crying. I remember looking at the casket and thinking that it didn't look like him, that he would have hated the tie they put on him, that none of this made sense. I didn't cry. Not then. I just stood there, numb, waiting for it to be over. After the funeral, people disappeared. At first, they checked in, called, texted, brought casseroles I didn't eat. But after a few weeks, the calls stopped. Life went on for everyone else, not for me. I couldn't go back to work. I couldn't focus. I couldn't stand in front of a classroom and talk about Shakespeare or Hemingway or the hero's journey when my own life had just collapsed. So I took a leave of absence. Then I retired early. I was 44 years old and I had nothing to do. The house felt too big, too quiet. I'd walk from room to room and see him everywhere, his coat still hanging by the door, his coffee mug in the cabinet, the book he was reading on the nightstand. I couldn't move anything. I couldn't throw anything away. It felt like erasing him. So I just lived around it, around the ghost of him. My friend Rachel tried to help. She'd call me every week, ask me to go for walks, to get coffee, to just leave the house. I'd say yes and then cancel at the last minute. I wasn't ready. I didn't know when I'd be ready. Maybe never. Then one night, about 9 months after David died, I found a notebook in his desk. It was old, leather-bound, filled with his handwriting. Lists, ideas, dreams. And on one of the pages, circled in red ink, was a single word: Rome. We'd talked about going to Rome for years. It was supposed to be our big trip, our 25th anniversary. We were going to spend 2 weeks there, walking the streets, eating pasta, visiting museums. David had been obsessed with Roman architecture. He had books all over the house about the Pantheon, the Colosseum, the aqueducts. He wanted to see them in person, to stand inside them, to understand how they were built. But we kept putting it off. There was always something. Work, money, time. And then he died. And Rome became another thing we'd never do. But looking at that notebook, at his handwriting, at that one word circled in red, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. A pull, a purpose. I thought, maybe I could go. Maybe I could take him with me. Not literally, but I still had his ashes. Half of them were buried at the cemetery. The other half were in a wooden box on my closet shelf. I'd kept them because I wasn't ready to let go completely, but now I had an idea. I could take them to Rome. I could scatter them there. I could finish what we started. It took me 2 months to actually buy the ticket. I'd open the website, look at flights, and then close the browser. I'd tell myself it was too expensive, too complicated, too lonely. But the idea wouldn't leave me alone. So finally, in late September, I bought a one-way ticket to Rome. I didn't book a return flight. I didn't know how long I'd stay. I just knew I had to go. I told Rachel. She was worried. She said I shouldn't go alone, that I wasn't in the right headspace, that Rome would still be there in a year or two. But I didn't listen. I needed this. I needed to do something. Anything. I needed to feel like I was still alive. I packed light. 1 suitcase, comfortable shoes, a jacket, the wooden box with David's ashes wrapped in a scarf at the bottom of my bag. I didn't tell anyone else I was going. I didn't want the questions, the concern, the advice. I just wanted to disappear for a while. The flight was long, 14 hours with a layover in Frankfurt. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, staring out the window, thinking about what I was doing. About whether David would have wanted this. About whether I was honoring him or just running away from my own life. I didn't have an answer. I landed in Rome on a Thursday morning in late September. The airport was crowded, chaotic, loud. I felt disoriented. My Italian was terrible. I'd downloaded a translation app, but I barely used it. I just followed signs, got my bag, and took a taxi to the hotel I'd booked near the Colosseum. The hotel was small, clean, but basic. The woman at the front desk barely looked at me when I checked in. She handed me a key and pointed toward the stairs. My room was on the 3rd floor. No elevator. I dragged my suitcase up and unlocked the door. The room was tiny. A single bed. A window overlooking a narrow street. A bathroom the size of a closet. But it was fine. I didn't need much. I unpacked slowly, hung up my clothes, put my toiletries in the bathroom, placed the wooden box on the nightstand. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at it. David's ashes. Half of what was left of him. I thought about opening it, but I didn't. Not yet. That first day, I didn't do much. I walked around the neighborhood, bought a bottle of water from a corner store, sat on a bench near the Colosseum and watched tourists take pictures. Everyone seemed happy, excited, alive. I felt like I was watching them from behind glass, like I was there but not really there. I went back to the hotel around 6. Ordered room service. Ate half of a pasta dish that tasted like nothing. I tried to sleep but couldn't. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering what I was supposed to do next. The next morning, I forced myself to leave the room. I had a plan. I wanted to visit the Pantheon. David had been obsessed with it. He had a book about its dome, about how it was built, about the oculus at the top. He used to talk about it at dinner, drawing diagrams on napkins, explaining the engineering. I thought if I went there, if I stood inside it, I'd feel close to him again. I walked. Rome in late September is still warm, but not unbearable. The streets were crowded with tourists. I passed gelato shops, souvenir stands, people selling bottled water for €3. I didn't buy anything. I just walked. When I got to the Pantheon, I stood outside for a long time. It was massive, ancient, exactly like the pictures. I went inside. It was cool and dark and quiet. I looked up at the dome, at the oculus, at the light pouring through. It was beautiful. But I didn't feel what I thought I'd feel. I didn't feel David. I just felt empty. I sat on one of the stone benches and cried, not loud, just quiet tears running down my face. A few people looked at me, but no one said anything. I wiped my face and left. Over the next 2 days, I visited more places: the Trevi Fountain, the Spanish Steps, Vatican City. I went through the motions, took a few pictures on my phone that I'd never look at again, ate meals alone at small restaurants, went back to the hotel and lay in bed, staring at the box on the nightstand. On the 3rd day, I decided I was ready. I was going to scatter David's ashes. I didn't know where exactly, but I thought maybe near the Colosseum. Somewhere he would have loved. Somewhere that mattered. I put the box in my purse and walked to a small cafe near the Colosseum. It was mid-morning. The cafe was quiet. I ordered an espresso and sat outside, trying to build up the courage to do what I came here to do. That's when everything changed. I was sitting at that cafe, holding my espresso, staring at nothing, when I heard glass shatter. I looked up. My purse had fallen off the back of my chair. It was open. Everything had spilled out onto the cobblestones. My phone, my wallet, my sunglasses, and the wooden box. The box had cracked. Not completely, but enough. A thin line ran down the side, and a small amount of ash had spilled onto the ground. I froze. I just stared at it. David's ashes. On the dirty street. Mixed with cigarette butts and dust and God knows what else. I dropped to my knees. I didn't think. I just started trying to scoop the ashes back into the box with my hands. My fingers were shaking. I could feel people staring at me. I didn't care. I was crying. Again. I couldn't stop. Then a voice said, "Let me help you." I looked up. A man was crouching next to me. He was tall, maybe late 40s, with dark hair going gray at the temples. He wore a white button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up, and expensive-looking glasses. He had kind eyes. He was already picking up my things, carefully, placing them back in my purse. "It's okay," he said. His English was perfect, just a slight accent. "Take your time." He reached for the box. I almost stopped him, but I didn't. He held it gently, like it mattered, and brushed off the ash that was still clinging to the outside. He didn't ask what it was. He just handed it back to me. "Thank you," I said. My voice was barely a whisper. He smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, sad one. "You're American." I nodded. "Visiting?" "Yes." He helped me stand. My knees hurt from kneeling on the cobblestones. He handed me my purse. Everything was back inside except the box. I was still holding it. "I'm sorry," I said. "I don't know why I'm such a mess." "You don't need to apologize," he said. He gestured to the box. "Is that someone you loved?" I looked down at it. I didn't know why I was telling him. I didn't know him. But I said, "My husband." He nodded slowly. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "My wife is gone too." I looked at him, really looked at him. There was something in his face, something that understood. "I'm Alessandro," he said. "Elise." He offered to buy me another coffee. I almost said no. I almost walked away, but I didn't. I said yes. We sat down at the same table. He ordered 2 espressos and a glass of water for me. We didn't talk much at first. He asked where I was staying. I told him. He asked how long I'd been in Rome. I told him 3 days. He asked if I was enjoying it. I said I didn't know. Then he told me about himself. He said he was a doctor, a cardiac surgeon. He worked at a private hospital in Rome. He said his wife had died 2 years ago. Cancer. He said it was fast. 6 months from diagnosis to death. He said he still wasn't used to being alone. I believed him. Everything about him felt real. The way he talked, the way he looked at me, the sadness in his voice that matched mine. We talked for over an hour. About loss, about grief, about how the world keeps moving and you're just standing still. He didn't try to fix anything. He didn't offer advice. He just listened. And when I cried again, he handed me a napkin and didn't make me feel embarrassed. When we finally stood to leave, he asked if I had plans for the next day. I said no. He said there was a concert at a small church near Piazza Navona. Classical music. Vivaldi. He said it might be nice. That sometimes music helps when nothing else does. He asked if I wanted to go with him. I should have said no. I should have thanked him and walked away. But I didn't. I said yes. He smiled. A real smile this time. He wrote down the address on a napkin and told me to meet him there at 7. Then he shook my hand and left. I walked back to my hotel in a daze. I couldn't stop thinking about him. About how easy it had been to talk to him. About how he didn't make me feel broken. I told myself it didn't mean anything, that it was just 2 sad people having coffee. But part of me felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Something light. That night, I texted Rachel. I told her I'd met someone. "Just as a friend," I said. She wrote back immediately. "Be careful." That was it. Just those 2 words. I didn't respond. The next evening, I changed my clothes 3 times before leaving the hotel. I settled on a simple black dress and a cardigan. I walked to the church. It was small, old, tucked into a side street I never would have found on my own. Alessandro was waiting outside. He looked different. Still casual, but he'd shaved and he smelled like cologne. Something subtle. Clean. "You came," he said. I almost didn't. "I'm glad you did." The concert was beautiful. We sat in wooden pews in the back. The church was lit by candles. The musicians played Vivaldi's 4 Seasons. I closed my eyes and let the music wash over me. For the first time in months, I felt something other than pain. I felt calm. After the concert, Alessandro asked if I wanted to get dinner. I said yes. We walked to a small trattoria a few blocks away. It was quiet, almost empty. We ordered wine and pasta. He asked about my life in Portland, about my job, about David. I told him everything, about the accident, about the funeral, about how I couldn't go back to work, about how I came to Rome to scatter David's ashes but couldn't bring myself to do it. He listened. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he reached across the table and put his hand on mine. Just for a second. Then he pulled it back. "You're very brave," he said. I laughed. "I don't feel brave. You are. You came here alone. That takes courage." I wanted to believe him. He told me more about his wife. Her name was Julia. She was a teacher. They'd been married for 15 years. No children. She'd wanted them, but it never happened. He said losing her was like losing half of himself. He said he threw himself into work because it was the only thing that made sense. But it didn't help. Not really. We stayed at the restaurant until they started putting chairs on tables. When we left, Alessandro walked me back to my hotel. We didn't talk much, just walked through the quiet streets. When we got to my door, he said goodnight. He didn't try to kiss me. He didn't ask to come in. He just said he'd like to see me again. I said I'd like that too. Over the next 3 days, we saw each other every day. He took me to places tourists don't usually go: a small villa outside the city, a vineyard in the hills, a quiet piazza where old men played chess. We talked for hours, about everything, about nothing. He made me laugh. I didn't remember the last time I'd laughed. He was attentive. He remembered everything I said. When I mentioned I liked a certain type of wine, he ordered it the next time we had dinner. When I said I was cold, he gave me his jacket. When I looked tired, he suggested we sit down. But there were small things. Things I noticed but didn't think too much about. He never talked about his work in detail. When I asked where his hospital was, he'd change the subject. He never wore a hospital ID. He said he didn't like to bring work with him when he was off duty. That made sense to me. One afternoon, we were having lunch at a cafe when his phone rang. He looked at the screen and his face changed. He went pale. He excused himself and stepped outside. I could see him through the window. He was pacing, talking fast. His hand was in his hair. He looked stressed, angry. When he came back, I asked if everything was okay. He said it was work, an emergency, a patient. He said he had to go. He paid the bill and left. Just like that. No kiss goodbye. No explanation. Just gone. I didn't hear from him for 6 hours. I sat in my hotel room, staring at my phone, wondering if I'd done something wrong. Then, around 9 at night, he texted me. "I'm sorry. Can I see you?" I met him at a bar near my hotel. He looked terrible. His eyes were red. His shirt was wrinkled. He ordered a whiskey and drank it fast. "What happened?" I asked. He said a patient had died. A young man, 28 years old, heart attack during surgery. He said he did everything he could, but it wasn't enough. He said the man's wife was there. She screamed at him, called him a murderer. He said he couldn't get her voice out of his head. I didn't know what to say. I just held his hand. He cried. Not loud. Just quiet tears running down his face. I thought about David, about loss, about how fragile everything is. We sat there for a long time. Then he looked at me and said, "I think I'm falling for you." I should have been scared. It was too fast, too much, but I wasn't. I said, "I think I am too." He kissed me. It was soft, gentle. It felt right. That night, he walked me back to my hotel. He asked if he could come in. I said yes. We didn't have sex. We just lay in bed together holding each other. He fell asleep first. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was real, wondering if I deserved to feel this way again. The next morning, he was gone when I woke up. There was a note on the pillow. "Had to go to work early. Let's have dinner tonight. I want to take you somewhere special." I smiled. I felt happy. For the first time in over a year, I felt genuinely happy. But that feeling didn't last long. That evening, Alessandro picked me up at 7. He was driving a black Mercedes. It looked expensive. Clean. He opened the door for me and I got in. The interior smelled like leather. "Where are we going?" I asked. "You'll see," he said. He was smiling, relaxed, nothing like the broken man I'd held the night before. We drove out of the city. The sun was setting. The roads got narrower, less traffic, more trees. We talked about small things. He asked if I'd tried a certain type of pasta. I said no. He said we'd have to fix that. I asked about his day. He said it was better now that he was with me. After about 40 minutes, we pulled up to a villa. It was beautiful. Old stone, surrounded by olive trees, lights glowing from the windows. He parked and came around to open my door. "What is this place?" I asked. "A friend's house," he said. "He's out of town. He lets me use it sometimes when I need to get away from the city." We walked inside. It was stunning. High ceilings, antique furniture, a fireplace, a long wooden table set for two with candles already lit. There was a bottle of wine on the table, 2 glasses. "You did all this?" I asked. He shrugged. "I wanted tonight to be special." We sat down. He poured the wine. We ate pasta with truffle oil, salad, bread. Everything tasted perfect. We talked and laughed and drank. I felt like I was in a dream. Like this wasn't my life. Like I was someone else. Someone who deserved this. After dinner, we sat on a couch by the fireplace. He put his arm around me. I leaned into him. We didn't talk for a while. Just sat there, listening to the fire crackle. Then he said, "I need to tell you something." I looked at him. His face was serious. "I know this is fast," he said. "I know we just met. But I haven't felt this way about anyone since Julia died. You make me feel alive again. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose you." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to run. It was too much, too soon. But another part of me wanted to stay. Wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could have this. "I feel the same way," I said. He kissed me. This time it was different. More urgent. More real. We moved to the bedroom upstairs. We made love. It was gentle and sad and desperate all at once. Afterward, we lay in bed, tangled up in each other. He fell asleep with his head on my chest. I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life had turned into this. I woke up the next morning alone. Again. I sat up. The bed was cold on his side. I called his name. No answer. I got up and walked downstairs. He wasn't there. His car was still outside, but he was gone. I found a note on the kitchen counter. "Had to step out for a work call. Be back soon. Make yourself coffee." I made coffee. I sat at the table and waited. An hour passed. Then 2. I tried calling him. It went straight to voicemail. I texted him. No response. By noon, I was starting to worry. I walked around the villa. It was quiet. Too quiet. I opened a few doors. One was a bedroom. Empty. Another was a bathroom. Nothing. Then I opened a door at the end of the hall. It was an office. There was a desk, a laptop, papers scattered everywhere. I shouldn't have looked, I know that. But I did. I walked over to the desk. The papers were invoices, receipts, but they weren't in Alessandro's name. They were in someone else's name. Someone called Marco Santini. I felt a chill run down my spine. I opened the laptop. It wasn't password protected. The screen lit up. There were emails, dozens of them. I started reading. They were in Italian, but I used my phone to translate. They were about money, transfers, accounts. And they mentioned women, American women, British women, German women. My hands were shaking. I kept reading. There was a folder on the desktop called Projects. I opened it. Inside were photos. Women. All of them middle-aged. All of them alone. There were notes next to each photo. Details. Names. Hometowns. How much money they had. And then I saw my photo. A picture of me sitting at that cafe. The one where we met. The one where I dropped the box. The note next to it said, Elise Warner, Portland, widow, retired professor. Estimated savings, $400K. I felt like I was going to be sick. I closed the laptop. I stood there, frozen, trying to breathe. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Then I heard a car. I ran to the window. It was the Mercedes. Alessandro was getting out, but he wasn't alone. There was someone with him, A younger man, maybe 30. They were talking, laughing. I panicked. I ran back to the bedroom, grabbed my purse, my phone. I needed to get out. I needed to leave. But how? We were in the middle of nowhere. I didn't have a car. I didn't even know where I was. I heard the front door open. Footsteps. Voices. They were speaking Italian. Fast. I couldn't understand. I hid in the bathroom. I locked the door. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I could hear them moving around downstairs. Then I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. A knock on the bedroom door. "Elise?" It was Alessandro. His voice was calm, normal. I didn't answer. "Elise, are you okay?" I still didn't answer. The doorknob turned. He walked into the bedroom. I could hear him moving around. Then he tried the bathroom door. Locked. "Elise, what's wrong? Open the door." "I saw the laptop," I said. My voice was shaking. Silence. Then he said, "I can explain." "Explain what? That you've been lying to me? That I'm just another woman on a list? That you've done this before?" "Elise, please open the door. Let me explain." "No." I heard him sigh. Then I heard him walk away. I thought he'd left. I waited, listened. Then I heard him talking to the other man downstairs. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was different. Harder. Colder. Then I heard the front door close. A car engine. Tires on gravel. I waited another 5 minutes. Then I unlocked the bathroom door and crept out. The villa was silent. I went downstairs. No one was there. The Mercedes was gone. I ran outside. I was in the middle of nowhere. Fields, trees, a dirt road leading away from the villa. No other houses in sight, no people, nothing. I started walking. I didn't know where I was going. I just walked. My phone had no signal. I kept checking. Nothing. I walked for what felt like hours. My feet were blistering in my shoes. I was crying, scared, angry, stupid. Finally, I saw a small house in the distance. I ran toward it. An old woman answered the door. She looked at me like I was crazy. I probably was. I tried to explain in broken Italian. She didn't understand. I showed her my phone. She nodded and pointed down the road. "Orvieto," she said. Orvieto. I'd heard of it. A town. I started walking again. It took me another hour. By the time I got to the edge of town, it was getting dark. I found a small cafe. The owner spoke a little English. I told him I needed help. He called a taxi for me. I gave the driver the address of my hotel in Rome. The drive took over an hour. I sat in the back seat, shaking. When we got to the hotel, I realized I didn't have my wallet. It was back at the villa, in my purse, which I'd left behind when I ran. The taxi driver was angry. He started yelling at me in Italian. The hotel clerk came out. I tried to explain. The clerk recognized me. He paid the driver. I promised I'd pay him back. I went up to my room. It was exactly how I'd left it 2 days ago. The bed made, the wooden box on the nightstand, everything normal. Except nothing was normal. I sat on the bed and tried to think. I needed my wallet, my passport, my credit cards. Everything was in my purse, back at that villa. And I didn't even know where the villa was. I didn't know how to get back. And even if I did, I couldn't go back, not alone. I tried calling Alessandro, straight to voicemail. I tried texting. Nothing. I searched for his hospital online. I couldn't find it. I searched for his name. Nothing. Dr. Alessandro Riva didn't exist. I started to panic, really panic. I checked my bank account on my phone. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. When the page loaded, my stomach dropped. 2 transactions. Both from yesterday. One for $15,000. Another for $25,000. Both wire transfers. Both to an account I didn't recognize. $40,000. Gone. I thought I was going to pass out. I called the bank. It was the middle of the night in Portland, but I didn't care. I got through to someone. I explained what happened. They said they'd open an investigation, but they couldn't guarantee anything. Wire transfers are almost impossible to reverse, especially international ones. I hung up. I sat there, staring at the wall, trying to breathe, trying to understand how this happened, how I let this happen. Then I remembered something. A few days ago, Alessandro had asked me for help. He said his credit card had been blocked. Something about a suspicious transaction. He said he was embarrassed, but he needed to pay for a surgery for a refugee child. An emergency. He said he'd pay me back the next day. I'd hesitated, but he looked so sincere, so desperate, and I wanted to help. I wanted to believe in him. So I transferred $15,000. He'd kissed me, thanked me, said I was saving a life. The next day, he said there was a complication. The child needed a second surgery. More money. He said his bank would have everything sorted out soon, but he couldn't wait. The child couldn't wait. I transferred another $25,000. He said he'd pay me back. He said he loved me. I was so stupid. I lay down on the bed. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of everything crushing me. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, replaying everything in my head. Every conversation, every smile, every touch. Looking for the moment I should have known. Looking for the moment I should have run. But I couldn't find it, because he'd been perfect. Every word, every gesture, every lie. The next morning, I forced myself to get up. I couldn't stay in that hotel room. I couldn't just lie there and fall apart. I needed to do something. I needed my passport. I needed to go home. I went downstairs to the front desk. The same clerk from last night was there. He looked at me with concern. "Are you okay, Signora?" "I need to go to the police," I said. He nodded. He gave me directions to the nearest station. It was a 20-minute walk. I didn't have money for a taxi. I started walking. Rome looked different now. The streets that had felt romantic a week ago now felt threatening. Every man I passed could be him, could be working with him. I kept my head down, walked fast. My heart was pounding the entire time. The police station was a gray building tucked between a pharmacy and a bakery. I walked inside. There was a woman at the front desk. She looked bored. I told her I needed to report a crime. She handed me a form. It was in Italian. I stared at it. "English?" I asked. She sighed and pulled out a different form. I filled it out. My hands were shaking. Name, passport number. I didn't have it. I wrote "stolen" in that space. Description of crime. I didn't even know where to start. Fraud, theft, emotional manipulation. All of it. When I finished, she took the form and told me to wait. I sat on a plastic chair in the corner. The station smelled like coffee and cigarette smoke. I waited for over an hour. People came and went. No one looked at me. Finally, a police officer called my name. He was young, maybe 30. He spoke some English. I followed him to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. He sat down. I sat down. He looked at the form. "You say your passport was stolen?" "Yes." "Where?" "At a villa, outside the city, near Orvieto." "Do you know the address?" "No." He frowned. "Do you know the name of the owner?" "He said it belonged to a friend, but I don't know if that's true." "I don't know if anything he said was true." "Who is he?" "His name is Alessandro Riva. At least that's what he told me. He said he's a doctor, a cardiac surgeon, but I don't think that's real either." The officer wrote something down. "Can you describe him?" I did. Tall, dark hair, glasses, late 40s. The officer kept writing. "And you say he stole money from you?" "Yes. $40,000. He looked up. "How?" Wire transfers. He asked me for help. Said he needed to pay for a surgery. I believed him. The officer put his pen down. He looked at me with something like pity. Signora, we see this often. Men who target foreign women. Americans especially. They are very good at what they do. Can you find him? He shrugged. We can try, but if the name is fake, if the hospital does not exist, it is very difficult. These men disappear quickly. What about my passport? You will need to go to your embassy. They can issue you an emergency passport, but it takes time. How much time? A few days, maybe a week. I felt my chest tighten. A week. I couldn't stay here for a week. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of this city. Is there anything else you can do? I asked. He looked at me. We will file the report. If we find him, we will contact you. But I must be honest, Signora. The chances are not good. I left the station feeling worse than when I arrived. The report felt like nothing. Just a piece of paper that would go into a file and never be looked at again. I walked to the U.S. Embassy. It was on the other side of the city. I didn't have money for a taxi or a bus. I walked. It took me almost 2 hours. My feet were killing me. I hadn't eaten. I felt dizzy, but I kept walking. The embassy was a large building surrounded by security. I had to go through metal detectors, show identification. I didn't have my passport, so I showed them my driver's license from my phone. A photo I'd taken months ago just in case. They let me through. Inside, I waited again. More plastic chairs, more forms. I filled everything out. Passport application, affidavit of loss, emergency contact. I wrote Rachel's name and number. Finally, a woman called me into an office. Her name was Kimberly. She was American, probably in her 50s. She had kind eyes but a tired face. She sat down across from me and read through my paperwork. You're not the first person to come in here with a story like this, she said. I looked at her. What do you mean? Romance scams. We see them all the time, especially in Rome, Florence, Venice, tourist cities. Men who target women traveling alone. They're very convincing. Have you heard of Alessandro Riva? She shook her head. They use different names, different stories, but the pattern is always the same. They make you fall for them fast. They gain your trust. Then they take your money. Did anyone ever get their money back? She looked at me with sympathy. No. I felt something break inside me. I'd known it was probably gone, but hearing her say it out loud made it real. What about the police? I asked. They'll file a report, but these men are professionals. They have fake documents, fake addresses, offshore accounts. By the time anyone starts looking, they're long gone. So that's it? I just lose everything? I'm sorry, she said, and she really did look sorry. The best thing you can do now is get home safely. We can issue you an emergency passport. It'll take about 3 days. You'll need to come back on Friday to pick it up. 3 days. I had to stay in Rome for 3 more days. I didn't know if I could do it. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? She asked. A hotel, but I don't have much money left. She gave me the name of a hostel, said it was cheap and safe, run by an American woman. She wrote down the address. Tell her Kimberly sent you. She'll help. I thanked her and left. I felt numb, completely numb. I took a bus this time. I had just enough coins in my pocket. The hostel was in a quieter part of the city, residential, less touristy. The woman who ran it was named Diana. She was maybe 60. Gray hair, American accent. She looked at me and didn't ask questions. Just showed me to a small room with 2 bunk beds. I was the only one in it. She said I could stay for €20 a night. I paid her for 3 nights. Cash. It was almost all I had left. The room was clean but basic. White walls, thin mattress, a single window overlooking a courtyard. I lay down on the bottom bunk and stared at the ceiling. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. I was too empty. I stayed in that room for most of the next 3 days. I only left to use the bathroom or get water from the kitchen downstairs. Diana brought me food, bread, cheese, fruit. I didn't ask her to. She just did it. She didn't ask me what happened. I think she already knew. On the second day, I called Rachel. It was early morning in Portland. She answered on the first ring. "Elise, are you okay? I've been trying to reach you." I told her everything. About Alessandro, about the money, about the villa, about the police. I told her I was an idiot, that I should have listened to her, that I didn't know how I was going to come home and face my life. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just said, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." We talked for an hour. She said she'd pick me up from the airport, that I could stay with her for a while if I needed to, that we'd figure it out together. When we hung up, I felt a little less alone. Not much, but a little. On Friday, I went back to the embassy. Kimberly was there. She had my emergency passport ready. It was a small blue book, temporary, valid for 1 year. She handed it to me like it was the most important thing in the world. And in that moment, it was. "Good luck," she said. I thanked her. I meant it. I went back to the hostel and booked a flight, the cheapest one I could find. It left the next morning. I packed my suitcase. I took the wooden box from the nightstand, the one with David's ashes. I still hadn't scattered them. I didn't know if I ever would. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Alessandro, about whether any of it had been real, whether he'd felt anything at all, or if I was just another job, just another woman on a list. I thought about all the things I should have noticed. The way he never talked about his work in detail, the way he always paid in cash, the way he dodged questions about where he lived, the way he disappeared for hours and came back with excuses that sounded perfect. But I also thought about the way he looked at me, the way he held my hand, the way he cried when he talked about his wife. Had all of that been an act? Or had some small part of it been real? I didn't know. I'd never know. The next morning, Diana drove me to the airport. She didn't charge me. She just said, "Take care of yourself." I checked in, went through security, sat at the gate and waited for my flight to board. I looked around at all the people. Families, couples, solo travelers. Everyone had somewhere to go. Everyone had a story. Mine just happened to end badly. When they called my boarding group, I stood up. I walked down the jet bridge. I found my seat. Window. Last row. I buckled my seatbelt and stared out at the tarmac. The plane started to move. It picked up speed. And then we were in the air. Rome disappeared below me, the city that had taken everything. I closed my eyes. I didn't cry. I just sat there. Numb. Broken. But alive. I was going home. The flight back to Portland was 14 hours. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, staring out the window at the clouds, replaying everything in my head. Over and over, like a loop I couldn't turn off. I kept thinking about the moment I met him, the cafe, the broken box, the ashes spilling onto the street. Had that been an accident? Or had he been watching me? Waiting for the right moment to step in and play the hero? I'd never know. When the plane landed in Portland, it was raining. Of course it was. I went through customs. The officer looked at my emergency passport and asked what happened. I said I lost it. He didn't press, just stamped it and waved me through. Rachel was waiting at arrivals. When she saw me, she ran over and hugged me. I didn't hug her back at first. I just stood there. Then I felt myself start to break. I hugged her and cried, right there in the middle of the airport. I didn't care who saw. She drove me to her house. She'd made up the guest room, clean sheets, towels. a bottle of water on the nightstand. She told me I could stay as long as I needed. I thanked her and went straight to bed. It was the middle of the afternoon, but I didn't care. I slept for 16 hours straight. When I woke up, it was dark outside. I could hear Rachel moving around downstairs. I got up and went to the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked terrible. Dark circles under my eyes. My face pale and hollow. I looked like someone I didn't recognize. I went downstairs. Rachel was in the kitchen making tea. She poured me a cup and we sat at the table. We didn't talk about Rome at first. We just sat there. Then she asked, "What are you going to do?" I didn't know. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I'd just been trying to survive. One day at a time. 1 hour at a time. "I need to figure out my money situation," I said. "See what's left." The next day, I went to my bank. I met with a manager, a woman named Susan. She pulled up my accounts on her computer. My retirement account was almost empty. 40,000 gone. I'd also spent money on the trip, hotels, meals, the flight. Altogether, I'd lost about $50,000. I had some savings left. Not much. Maybe 30,000. Enough to live on for a few months if I was careful. But my retirement was gone. The money I'd been saving for 20 years. The money that was supposed to carry me through the rest of my life. Susan said the bank had opened an investigation, but the money had been wired to an account in Malta. Then moved again. Probably multiple times. She said the chances of recovering it were almost zero. I already knew that. But hearing it out loud still hurt. I left the bank and walked to a coffee shop. I sat in the corner and stared at my phone. I had messages from people I hadn't talked to in months. Friends from work, former colleagues, my sister-in-law, all asking how I was, how the trip went, if I was feeling better. I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't know what to say. Over the next few weeks, I barely left Rachel's house. I'd wake up, eat something, sit on the couch, stare at the TV without watching it, go back to bed. Rachel tried to get me to talk, to go for walks, to see a therapist. I said I would, but I didn't. I couldn't face the world. I couldn't face the fact that I'd been so stupid, that I'd let a stranger take everything from me, that I'd fallen for the oldest trick in the book. I kept replaying the moments I should have known. The phone call that made him disappear. The way he never wore a hospital ID. The fact that I never met any of his friends or saw where he lived. All the red flags I'd ignored because I wanted so badly to believe that someone could love me again. One night, about a month after I got back, I was lying in bed when I remembered something. The notebook. David's notebook. The one with Rome circled in red. I got up and dug through my suitcase. I found it at the bottom, wrapped in a t-shirt. I sat on the floor and opened it. I flipped through the pages. His handwriting, his dreams, his plans for us. And then I saw something I hadn't noticed before. On the page after Rome, he'd written something else. Life is short, but it's also long. Don't waste it being afraid. I sat there, staring at those words. David had written that years ago. Probably during one of his late-night planning sessions. But it felt like he was talking to me now, like he was telling me something I needed to hear. I'd spent the last year being afraid of moving on, afraid of being alone, afraid of living. And then I'd gone to Rome and tried to force myself not to be afraid, and it had destroyed me. But maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe the point wasn't to stop being afraid. Maybe it was to keep going anyway. I closed the notebook. I got up and went to Rachel's kitchen. It was 2 a.m, but I couldn't sleep. I made myself tea and sat at the table. I opened my laptop. I hadn't touched it since before Rome. I started writing. I didn't plan to. I just started typing. About David. About the grief. About Rome. About Alessandro. About the villa. About everything. I wrote for 3 hours straight. When I finished, the sun was coming up. I'd written over 5,000 words. It was messy, raw, unfiltered, but it was real. I saved it and went to bed. Over the next few months, I kept writing. Not every day, but most days. I wrote about the whole experience, from the moment David died to the moment I landed back in Portland. I wrote about the things I was ashamed of, the things I was angry about, the things I still didn't understand. Writing became the only thing that made sense, the only thing that felt like progress. Rachel encouraged me. She said I should share it, that other women needed to hear it. I wasn't sure. I didn't want to be pitied. I didn't want to be the cautionary tale. But then I started researching. I found forums, support groups, websites dedicated to romance scams. I read story after story. Women just like me. Different countries, different men. But the same pattern, the same devastation. And I realized I wasn't alone. I kept writing. I turned my notes into chapters. I worked with a freelance editor Rachel knew. Someone who understood what I was trying to do. We polished it, structured it, made it into something coherent. It took me 8 months to finish. When it was done, I had a manuscript, a book. I called it Love in Rome, How a 9-Day Dream Became a Lifelong Lesson. I didn't expect much. I self-published it on Amazon. Just wanted it out there. Wanted other women to know they weren't alone. That it could happen to anyone. That being smart or educated or cautious didn't make you immune. The first week, I sold 12 copies. Mostly to people I knew. Then someone shared it on a Facebook group for women travelers. Then someone else shared it on a forum for widows. Then a blogger wrote about it. Within a month, I'd sold over 1,000 copies. People started reaching out, emailing me, thanking me, telling me their own stories. Some were worse than mine. Some were different, but just as painful. I started responding, offering support, listening. I'd spent months feeling like a victim, like I'd lost everything. But now I was starting to see that maybe I'd gained something too. A voice, a purpose, a way to turn the worst thing that ever happened to me into something that could help others. I moved out of Rachel's house, got a small apartment downtown. Nothing fancy, just a 1-bedroom with a desk by the window. I kept writing, not just about Rome, but about grief, about recovery, about rebuilding. I started a blog, then a podcast. I interviewed other women who'd been scammed, shared their stories, connected them with resources, with lawyers, with therapists, with each other. My retirement money was gone. I had to go back to work. I got a job teaching part-time at a community college. It wasn't what I'd planned, but it was enough. And in some ways, it was better, because now I had something else, something that mattered. A year after I got back from Rome, I got an email from a woman in London. She said she'd just met a man, a doctor. He was charming, attentive, too good to be true. She'd read my book, and something about his story didn't sit right with her. She asked me what I thought. I told her to trust her instincts, to ask questions, to verify everything, to protect herself. She wrote back a week later. She'd confronted him. He'd disappeared, just like Alessandro. She said I'd saved her from making the worst mistake of her life. That email changed something in me. I realized that what happened in Rome didn't just destroy me. It also made me stronger. It gave me a way to help others avoid the same pain. Alessandro took my money. He took my trust. He took my sense of safety. But he didn't take everything. He didn't take my ability to survive, to rebuild, to keep going. I still have the wooden box. David's ashes. I never scattered them in Rome. I keep them on my bookshelf now, next to the first copy of my book, a reminder of where I've been and where I'm going. I'm not the same person I was before David died. I'm not the same person who went to Rome looking for closure. I'm someone else now. Someone who knows what it's like to lose everything and still keep going. And that's enough. I'm telling you this story not because I want sympathy. I'm telling you because it could happen to you. It could happen to your mother, your sister, your friend. It could happen to anyone who's vulnerable, who's lonely, who's looking for something to hold on to. Romance scams aren't just about money. They're about trust, about hope, about the part of us that wants to believe in second chances. And the people who run these scams know exactly how to exploit that. They study you, they learn what you need, and then they become exactly that person. Alessandro wasn't real, but the pain he caused was. The money I lost was real. The shame I felt was real. The months I spent trying to put myself back together were real. But here's what I learned. You can survive this. You can lose everything and still find a way forward. It won't be easy. It won't be quick. But it's possible. If you're watching this and you think you might be in a situation like mine, please listen. Ask questions. Verify everything. If someone asks you for money, no matter how good the reason sounds, stop. If someone is moving too fast, pushing too hard, making you feel like you need to act now or lose them forever, stop. If something feels off, even just a little bit, trust that feeling. Don't do what I did. Don't ignore the red flags because you want so badly to believe. Don't let loneliness or grief or hope cloud your judgment. Protect yourself. You deserve that. And if it's already happened to you, if you're sitting there right now feeling ashamed or stupid or broken, please hear me. You are not alone. This is not your fault. These people are professionals. They're trained to manipulate. They're trained to find your weaknesses and use them against you. You didn't fail. You were targeted. It took me a long time to accept that, to stop blaming myself, to stop replaying every moment and wondering what I could have done differently. But the truth is, I did the best I could with the information I had. We all do. What matters now is what you do next. Do you stay down, or do you get back up? I chose to get back up. I chose to write about it, to talk about it, to help others avoid the same trap. And that choice saved me. Not financially. I'll probably never get that money back. But emotionally, mentally, spiritually, I'm not the same person I was before Rome. I'm stronger. I'm wiser. I'm more careful. But I'm also more compassionate. Because I know what it's like to be fooled, to be broken, to have to start over from nothing. My book is out there now. Love in Rome: How a 9-Day Dream Became a Lifelong Lesson. If you want to read the full story, it's available on Amazon. But more than that, if you need support, if you need someone to talk to, reach out. There are communities, resources, people who understand. You don't have to go through this alone. David used to say that life is short, but also long. That we shouldn't waste it being afraid. I think about that a lot now. I was afraid after he died. Afraid to live. Afraid to move on. And then I tried not to be afraid. And I got hurt in a different way. But maybe the point isn't to stop being afraid. Maybe the point is to be afraid and keep going anyway. To make mistakes and learn from them. To fall down and get back up. To lose everything and realize that you still have yourself. That's what I'm doing now. I'm moving forward. One day at a time. Building a new life that looks nothing like the one I planned. But it's mine. And it's real. And no one can take that from me. So, if you're watching this from a place of pain, from a place of loss, from a place of uncertainty, I want you to know something. You will survive this. You will get through it. And one day, you'll look back and realize that the worst thing that ever happened to you also made you into someone stronger. That's my story. That's what Rome taught me. Not about love, not about trust, but about survival, about resilience, About the fact that no matter how much you lose, you can always rebuild. Thank you for watching. If this story helped you or someone you know, please share it. Leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, take care of yourself. You deserve that. Stay safe out there.